So I want to take a minute to reflect on my experiences in uh, ALS 2410 Challenge 2050 Global Uncertainty. Um, Great class. Let's start with that, I guess. Learned a lot, which is weird. I mean, not weird, but I learned to think systematically. It was one of the biggest things that we learned how much everything's connected. There's like problems, and you can be like, oh, there's a hunger problem. Oh, we'll feed them, but it's like that we learned that there's so much more connected to that, and so much more behind that. Like, why are people hungry, or what are issues into implementing some way to feed them, which is really interesting to think that there's just not people want to be like, oh, this is a problem and we need to fix it, but it's like there's so many different ways to fix it and so many different implications that are involved in trying to solve a problem like that. So I guess it taught me to look at problems from a lot of different angles. Once you say like, okay, well, I think this would solve the problem. If we were to give money to these communities or something, and then you start to realize like, where's the money going to come from, or what are they actually going to spend the money on, or how would the money actually be handed out, stuff like that. How do you decide who needs the money? How do you decide what poverty is? That was a really interesting class when we kind of questioned, what constitutes poverty, because everyone's just like, oh, there's impoverished nations out there, and there's people in poverty living in America, and it's like, what is that? How do you define that? Which I think a lot of people can't do. I still don't know that I can necessarily define it particularly. I think it's a comparison um, to other people's wealth, but I'm not sure. I'm still kind of divided on that answer. Um, Also learned that the world has a lot of problems that I didn't even think about and didn't really realize, and it's kind of scary because there's these huge problems looming, like Challenge 2050. How are we going to deal with that kind of population and stuff? And these aren't the issues that people, or like the public, at least the American public, is concerned with. You turn on the news and they're not talking about how we might run out of water in another 20 years, or we might not have enough room for all these people in 35 years. And instead, they're talking about things that I don't want to say are unimportant, but like things that aren't going to matter in another 35 years if we don't have enough room for all these people. So I think that's really interesting. I think people need to look more at the bigger picture instead of getting so upset over things that it's like, are you even going to remember that in 2 years? Um, so that was kind of interesting. Kind of put life and the world in perspective, I think, knowing that, everything we have might not be there forever. Maybe we shouldn't take all these things for granted, like water or living space or food. Um, and I guess the last thing I really wanted to touch on with what I learned in the class, and I've had a lot of classes that worked with teams, and like I took groups and teams with Tony, and this class, though, I think was a little bit different, partially because we were handling such a touchy subject, um, and it worked with a lot of people that had very different beliefs than me, on a lot of issues. And so it was kind of interesting to see how different opinions could work together to kind of come up with a solution to save the world, even though some of us might be like really, pro-government, and some people are anti-government, and whether you believe in global warming or not, stuff like that. So it was interesting to see how we kind of butted heads on those things, and then how we got around them, worked together and found compromise and consensus, which I think was important. Like, I think that was, I don't know, really interesting, and I think it was the closest thing to real world, like, problem solving that I've faced so far in college, which is interesting because it's my last semester, so next step is the real world. I think this was a good look into it. So, yeah, I really enjoyed the class. I think anyone that's thinking about taking the class should take the class. It was definitely an amazing learning experience.